in response to what we see as certainly the George Floyd murder by the police officer in Minnesota kicked off an enormous reaction, as it should have. But subsequently, we've come to realize, and many people are protesting and in anguish over what we see as a police system that doesn't have justice equally for all. So we're looking for a true solution here. We're looking for not just a political talking point, a solution that we can focus on. The bill begins, and it has a lot of reporting and accountability and transparency and training. I'm going to talk about a couple specific items in it because I think it will go a long way towards improving the law enforcement, and I think that will help us improve the perceptions and the trust that communities of color are lacking in our law enforcement. We know that exists, and we've just got to do something about it. So one of the things, and I'll just kind of start it kind of randomly, is body cameras. We know, for instance, in the case in Louisville, all 5 of those police officers had body cameras, but they didn't have them on. So we do a lot towards not just providing the technology, but also requiring that police officer has to have that body camera on at all times. It's a protection for the person who they're apprehending, but it's a protection for the police officer at the same time. And so that's an important part. It requires also to stop the phenomenon of passing bad apples from police department to police department, which we know exists. That we are requiring local law enforcement to retain their disciplinary records on their officers, and it requires, if you're hiring an officer, that you check those records at the other department to find out what has gone on. There's different ways of approaching this. We approach it from the local standpoint. The president has put out an executive order to create a national database, and I believe the bill they're working in the House is a state database, but we're all trying to get to the same place. In my view, chokeholds should be banned. This bill does ban chokeholds. You see that we do it a little bit differently by really, if you don't have a policy in place to ban chokeholds, you're not going to have access to a lot of the grants and such that a lot of our police officers are getting, whether it's FERN grants, COPS grants, or something like that. So the president, again, yesterday made an affirmative step in this direction of banning chokeholds. It provides for a lot of different types of training, de-escalation training, race sensitivity training, also training for law officers who are on duty, and it should be their duty to intervene when they see a fellow law enforcement officer using excessive force. We saw that in Minneapolis. Many of us wondered, why did somebody not intervene when there were 3 other officers sitting there? So I think this is a support bill supportive of law enforcement, but also bringing about positive change to make sure that we're getting towards that equal protection for all. And I think it can make a real difference. I think also that if you look at the process here, there's a lot of other things in the bill, but I kind of gave you some of the highlights. If you look at the process here, this bill is going to be up on the Senate floor on a week from today. We should have 100 senators voting for us to have this discussion on the Senate floor. As I said from the outset, this is a serious policy endeavor, and it shouldn't be caught in politics. It shouldn't be caught, and many of the things in this bill are agreed on. Probably 70-75% are bipartisan bills that have been offered in the past. For instance, the anti-lynching bill is a bipartisan one, and law enforcement hiring and training to make sure that your police force actually reflects what your population is. Try to get more minorities to become police officers, and so that's the direction that we're going. We'll have that vote on Wednesday. It's yet to be seen what reaction we're going to have totally, but I really am imploring my friends on the other side of the aisle to join with us in this discussion. This is one of the roles that I play, David. As you know, I'm on the Appropriations Committee. I worked with our subcommittee chairs and also the full committee to say that this would be mandatory funding. It's over a 5-year period. I can't give you precisely the breakdown, but it's not a 1 year done, one and done. It's a long-term commitment of mandatory funding to this to these different areas. Wow, I'm going to have to. I am going to have to get you the detail on that. I don't know. I think it makes a new federal crime of lynching, and it's already passed the Senate before, but it's held up a little bit right now. I'll get that detail to you. I think the biggest weight, honestly, has been the stark video of George Floyd's murder. Of course, that sparked the protests and the outcry for all across the country of outcry of just disgust, but also help, cry for help. And so I think that the protests obviously weigh into this, but I think really it's that spark. The spark was lit when that video became so prevalent and so obvious as to what had happened. That's what I attribute to the weight that's pushing this. Absolutely. There's grant money for body cameras, and there's also penalties built in there for those who fail to ensure correct usage of their body cameras. And you saw that, as I said, in Louisville, where the 5 didn't have their camera on, and I believe the police chief was fired. I mean, we've got to hold people responsible for using the best technologies, but if you can't afford it, you're going to be able to hopefully afford it with these new grant programs. Yeah, I think part of the reason is that, as I said in the beginning, that we do not deal with the qualified immunity issue because for some of our Republican members, anyway, this is a non-starter because it provides protections, certain protections of law enforcement, and there is a concern that without these protections, we wouldn't be able to recruit and ask officers to do the job of policing that we ask them to do. The reason, but that doesn't mean there isn't some room for some looking at qualified immunity in the total and making some changes to it. I believe the House bill eliminates it totally, and that's just a stretch too far. But I think that there are. I think that's why it's so important that we get this bill up onto the floor on Wednesday, and that we have this debate with those who believe qualified immunity has damaged our system and that we shouldn't move forward with it. It is a part. My understanding is with the police unions are very strong on this, and it would be a difficult step for them to embrace. So I think we need to have a discussion on this, and we need to see if there's some common ground ways that we can change qualified immunity that could maybe make it better, but also give those who are wronged and those who have damages because of acts of a law enforcement officer might have some improved ways to seek some resolution in those areas. Well, I am concerned with the movement that is the defund police movement. I am deeply concerned about that because I think every citizen of this country has enjoyed a law and order and a lawful society, and we want to have, and a part of that is a well-run law enforcement arm. And I think that we have there's a certain part of our society that's lost trust in that law enforcement because of what you see, tragedies like George Floyd or Breonna Taylor just add to that. And so we're trying to bring about that faith in our law enforcement that we think is necessary. But the way to do that is to not step back and let people take over 6 blocks of a city and absolutely destroy property and businesses that individuals have built up their whole life and create their own law enforcement within that understand that's what's going on in Seattle. So I think that we need to get both sides together. Just because we have strong law enforcement doesn't mean we can't have strong civil rights protections as well. Well, I think that maintaining and appropriately sharing disciplinary records is critical. And I think what you'll see in our bill is that in order to move in that direction, if you're not keeping records, if you're not retaining your records and not following up with other police departments on those records, you're going to have, from the federal government, you're going to have some negative effects, and that mostly would result in less funding, which means less officers and other things. So I think that the idea of an independent review board is something that we need to have a discussion on in front of American people. And that's why I think it's imperative that we get every 100 senators to say on Wednesday, yes, we want this bill. You all know how this works. It works. You put the bill up, you look at amendments, you have discussions, you vote them up and down, and that's what we need to do. So that would probably be a part of the discussion as well, an independent review board. Well, I think part of it is training. I think that there's much enhanced training, and this is something that's supported in both the House and the Senate bill. Enhanced training. I think some negative actions that would happen if this retention of disciplinary records are not followed through on, if you don't have accurate, you have increased penalties for false police reports, because we find out that that's happening as well. I think that happened in the Louisville case. So I think you're hitting on a really good point, and I think we've tried to address it a couple different ways by increased penalties, but also increased training at the same time. Well, I don't know that we'll go back. I don't know that. I mean, I think that some of this is already going on in terms of keeping records that are shared with other police departments in the terms of previous hirings. I think that has to be at the discretion of the department. I think it would be heavily discouraged to if you have somebody who's been in an incident that has been determined to be racially charged or overuse of force. I would think that the next department, because of training and other sensitivities that we're trying to build into this, and the sensitivities we see all around the country, that would be enough to prevent the hiring of a bad apple into a police force. But I'll have to find out whether it goes retroactive. I don't have the exact answer to that. Kelly can get back to you on that. I am personally, myself, I am all in favor of banning, just flat out a ban on chokehold. That should be the result of what happens in this bill. It's approached a different way. Senator Scott wanted to approach this a little bit different way, and basically what it says is if you have to have, as a local department or a state department or whatever, county, you have to have a protocol in place that bans chokehold. If you don't, you're not going to get your COPS grant, you're not going to get your burn grant. So it goes about it a little bit differently, but I'm all for the banning of that, what is a deadly instrument at this point. I think the president didn't go fully for the bans and left a slight door open in that in the case of extreme bodily harm to the police officer, they may be allowed to employ this technique. But for me, I think it's banned in Charleston. I don't know if it's banned statewide, but it's not, it's not used in our state. Well, we certainly have a record of both parties throwing the political stuff at one another on a lot of different issues. Personally, I think that this is an issue that's so tender for our nation and so in an immediate need of not a Band-Aid, but some affirmative action that I think we all need to get to the table. So I'm hoping that because 70 to 75% of this bill are all bipartisan bills, The other 25% we can work out. And I think we need to get a result. So I'm hopeful. We came together on COVID. We're coming together today on the Great American Outdoors Act. So it's not beyond the realm of possible. And I think, as I said, the sensitivities and the anguish that I think people have, we've got to listen to that. And that should drive us all to the bargaining table to figure out a good bill that makes a big difference.